This is technically my house now, Jenny. Dad left it to me in the will. The words hung in the air like icicles, sharp and cold, as my sister Amanda's voice cut through the cheerful Christmas music playing in the background. I stood frozen, the platter of gingerbread cookies I'd just baked still warm in my hands, as 20 pairs of eyes from various family members darted between us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The beautiful colonial home that had been my sanctuary for the past 3 years, the one I'd lovingly restored room by room, the one that held all my dreams and plans, was suddenly being claimed by my sister with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. Her husband Kyle smirked behind his eggnog, already mentally measuring the windows for new curtains. "We're thinking of turning your art studio into a home gym," he added, as if we were discussing something as trivial as a change in dinner plans. I felt the room spin slightly as I set down the cookies before they could tumble to the floor. "What are you talking about?" "Dad didn't leave you the house," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Amanda's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively. "It's all there in black and white, little sister. I've got the paperwork in my purse. We've been nice enough to let you stay here rent-free, but Kyle and I have decided it's time to move in after the new year. You have until January 31st to find a new place." That's when I knew this wasn't an impulsive announcement. This was a calculated move, delivered in front of the entire family on Christmas Day, when I would be least expecting it, when fighting back would make me the villain who ruined the holiday. What my sister didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had documents of my own, documents that would change everything. But that revelation would have to wait for the right moment. The disruptive event. 3 years earlier, I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, keys in hand, fighting back tears. My father had passed away just 2 months before after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. His absence left a gaping hole in our small family. My mother had died years earlier, leaving just me, my older sister Amanda, and Dad to forge ahead as a unit. Or so I thought. The old colonial house in Pinewood, Michigan had been in our family for generations. Built in the 1930s, it boasted hardwood floors, crown molding, and enough character to fill a novel. It was also falling apart. The roof leaked in 3 places. The plumbing was temperamental at best, and the once charming wallpaper was peeling like old sunburn. "You sure you want to do this, Jen?" Tom Ramirez asked, setting down the last of my boxes in the dusty foyer. Tom had been my best friend since college, and one of the few people who hadn't disappeared when my life imploded the year before. "Not really," I admitted, surveying the daunting project I'd just committed to. "But I don't have many options right now." My former life in Chicago had been sleek and promising. Executive position at a marketing firm, swanky downtown apartment, and a fiancé who worked as a surgical resident at Northwestern Memorial. That life evaporated when I discovered my fiancé had been having an affair with a pharmaceutical rep for most of our relationship. The subsequent meltdown cost me not only my engagement, but also my job after I had a panic attack during a presentation to our biggest client. With my lease ending and my bank account dwindling, moving back to my hometown of Pinewood had seemed like my only option. When Dad got sick shortly after my return, any plans I might have made were put on hold as I became his primary caregiver. "Amanda could have helped more," Tom said quietly, opening windows to let fresh air circulate through the musty rooms. I shrugged, unwilling to rehash old grievances. "She has her own life, the kids, Kyle's political ambitions." I trailed off, knowing the excuses by heart. The truth was, Amanda had always been too busy for family responsibilities. While I'd put my life on hold to care for Dad, she'd managed to visit only twice during his 3-month illness, both times for less than a day. Her husband, Kyle, a state representative with his eyes on Washington, had accompanied her once, spending most of the visit on his phone in the hospital parking lot. "Family meeting tomorrow," I said, changing the subject. "Dad's lawyer wants to go over the will with both of us." Tom nodded, but his expression was worried. "Just be prepared, okay? Amanda has always had a way of getting what she wants." The next morning, I arrived at the law offices of Goldstein and Fritz 15 minutes early, anxious to get the meeting over with. The small conference room felt overly warm as I waited, flipping through a gardening magazine without absorbing any of the content. Amanda swept in exactly 10 minutes late, immaculately dressed in a navy pantsuit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She air-kissed my cheek, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume. "Jenny, you look tired. Have you tried that serum I sent you for the circles under your eyes?" Before I could respond, Mr. Goldstein entered with a leather portfolio. After expressing appropriate condolences, he cleared his throat and began outlining the contents of Dad's will. "The estate is relatively straightforward," he explained. "The house at 247 Maple Street is to remain in the family, with Jennifer to have lifetime residence rights. There is a life insurance policy to be divided equally between both daughters, and various personal effects as outlined in this document." I felt a small wave of relief. The house was staying in the family, and I could continue to live there. It wasn't ownership exactly, but it was security, something I desperately needed. Amanda's perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. "What exactly does lifetime residence rights mean? Who actually owns the property?" Mr. Goldstein adjusted his glasses. "The property remains in the Cooper family trust. Jennifer has the right to live there for as long as she wishes. Should she choose to vacate the property, ownership would transfer to both daughters equally." Amanda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I see. And the mortgage? There is still a mortgage, correct?" "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. "Approximately $137,000 remaining." "And who's responsible for that?" Amanda pressed. "The mortgage payments would be the responsibility of the resident. In this case, Jennifer." I felt my stomach drop. Dad had refinanced the house to pay for Mom's medical bills years ago. The monthly payment wasn't huge, but on my currently non-existent income, it might as well have been millions. Amanda's smile widened slightly. "Well, that settles things nicely," she said, gathering her designer purse. "Jenny, do keep us updated on how you're managing. I'm sure it must be difficult with your employment situation." After the meeting, I sat in my car in the parking lot, trying to process what had just happened. I had a house I couldn't afford. I had no job. I had a sister who clearly expected me to fail. My phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Diane Carter, our elderly neighbor who had been dropping off casseroles throughout Dad's illness. "Jennifer, dear, I was wondering if you might help me with something," she said when I answered. "The Historical Society is looking for someone to catalog some local artifacts. Just part-time. I thought of you, with your organizational skills." It wasn't marketing in Chicago, but it was something. "That sounds perfect, Mrs. Carter. When can I start?" "Tomorrow morning? And please, call me Diane. We're neighbors now." That evening, I wandered through the empty house, trying to imagine how I could possibly make this work. The mortgage payment loomed large in my mind, along with the countless repairs needed. In the kitchen, water stains marked the ceiling from the upstairs bathroom leak. The ancient furnace made ominous clanking sounds. I climbed the creaking stairs to what had once been my childhood bedroom. Sitting on the window seat, I looked out at the large oak tree in the backyard. The one with the treehouse Dad had built us when I was 8, and Amanda was 12. Even then, she had claimed the larger room in the plywood structure, relegating me to the smaller section. Some things never changed. My phone pinged with a text from Amanda. "Kyle and I might be interested in buying you out of the house when you realize you can't handle it. Just say the word." I turned off my phone without responding and curled up on the window seat, too exhausted to even make up the bed. As sleep finally claimed me, I made a silent promise to myself and to the memory of my father. I wouldn't give up this house without a fight. The job at the Historical Society was a godsend, even if the pay was minimal. My days were spent organizing dusty photographs, cataloging donated items, and transcribing oral histories from Pinewood's oldest residents. The quiet, methodical work suited my battered spirit, giving me space to heal while still providing enough structure to get me out of bed each morning. Diane, who served as the Society's board president, became my unofficial guide to life in Pinewood as an adult, rather than as a child or a caretaker. "You've lived here all your life, but you've never really seen it," she observed one day as we sorted through photographs from the 1960s. "You were always in such a hurry to leave." She wasn't wrong. I'd spent my high school years counting the days until I could escape to college, then visited only on holidays and for the occasional weekend. Now, through the Historical Society's archives, I was seeing my hometown through new eyes. I learned about the former factory that had employed half the town during the war years, the flood of 1952 that had nearly washed away the downtown area, and the visiting president who had once spent the night at what was now the bed and breakfast on Elm Street. "Did you know your house was part of the Underground Railroad?" Diane asked one afternoon, showing me a yellowed map. "That odd little storage space off the pantry, it used to be a hiding place." I hadn't known. In fact, I realized I knew very little about the house that had been in my family for generations. That evening, I explored the cramped space behind the pantry with new appreciation, running my hands along the rough wooden walls and imagining the courage of both those who had sought shelter there and those who had provided it. As weeks passed, I settled into a routine. Mornings at the Historical Society, afternoons working on the house, patching, painting, fixing what I could, and learning to live with what I couldn't. Tom drove down from Grand Rapids some weekends to help with bigger projects, and occasionally other friends from high school who had remained in Pinewood stopped by with tools or advice. The house began to transform under my attention, and so did I. The panic attacks that had plagued me in Chicago subsided. The constant knot in my stomach loosened. I started sleeping through the night again. The mortgage payments remained a challenge. My salary from the Historical Society covered utilities and groceries, but little else. I took on freelance marketing work when I could find it, writing copy for local businesses' websites and creating social media strategies for shops in the nearby outlet mall. Each month, I managed to scrape together just enough to make the mortgage payment, sometimes selling items I no longer needed on online marketplaces or picking up odd jobs. Each check I wrote felt like a small victory. Another month, the house remained mine. Amanda called occasionally, always managing to work the house into the conversation. "Just checking to see how you're managing that big old place," she'd say, her voice dripping with false concern. "Kyle and I were talking about what a burden it must be for you." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I kept my responses vague and upbeat, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of knowing how close to the financial edge I often came. What I didn't tell her was how the house had become more than just shelter. It had become my purpose. Each repaired floorboard and freshly painted wall represented my slow journey back to myself. 6 months after moving in, I converted the small sunroom at the back of the house into an art studio. I hadn't painted seriously since college, but the light-filled space seemed to demand creative use. Soon, canvases began to accumulate. Landscapes of the nearby lake, still lifes of objects found in the attic, portraits of neighbors who were becoming friends. Diane suggested I display some pieces at the Historical Society's annual summer fundraiser. To my surprise, 3 paintings sold. Then a local coffee shop asked to display my work, and more sales followed. Nothing that would make me rich, but enough to start a small emergency fund for house repairs. Just before Christmas that first year, a pipe burst in the upstairs bathroom, sending water cascading through the kitchen ceiling. The emergency plumber's bill wiped out my savings and then some. Desperate, I swallowed my pride and called Amanda. "I hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a bind," I explained after exchanging pleasantries. "The plumbing emergency wiped me out, and I'm worried about making this month's mortgage payment." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably long before Amanda spoke. "Well, this is exactly what Kyle and I were concerned about. You've taken on more than you can handle with that house." "It's just a temporary setback," I assured her. "I've got 2 commissions coming in next month and—" "Jenny," she interrupted, "be realistic. You're barely making ends meet with your little hobby paintings and that volunteer job." "It's not volunteer. I get paid," I corrected. "Barely," she countered. "Look, Kyle and I are prepared to make you an offer. We'll buy out. Your interest in the house, you can use the money to get a fresh start somewhere more manageable for your situation." The condescension in her voice made my teeth clench. "I'm not selling my interest in the house, Amanda. I just need a loan to get through this month. I'll pay you back." Another long pause. "How much?" "1,500, I said, hating every syllable. "I'll transfer it to your account," she said finally. "But Jenny, you need to think about the future. This isn't sustainable." The money appeared in my account the next day, along with a text message. "This is a loan, not a gift. We'll discuss repayment terms after the holidays." I made the mortgage payment on time, but Amanda's words echoed in my head. Was I being unrealistic? Was I clinging to the house out of sentiment, unable to face the fact that I couldn't afford it? That night, I sat at my father's old desk in the study, reviewing my finances for the 100th time. The desk had always intimidated me as a child, a massive oak piece with dozens of small drawers and compartments. Dad had kept it meticulously organized, each space dedicated to specific documents or tools. Absent-mindedly, I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk, feeling a slight gap in the wood. Curious, I pressed harder, and to my surprise, a small, hidden drawer popped open. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "My dear Jennifer, if you're reading this, it means you've found my hiding spot, the one I showed you when you were 10, and you needed a place to keep your diary safe from your sister's prying eyes. I always knew you'd remember when the time was right. There are things I couldn't say in my will, legal complications that Mr. Goldstein advised against putting in writing officially. But you deserve to know the full truth about the house and my wishes for it. The mortgage that remains on the house isn't actually a traditional bank mortgage. When I needed to raise funds for your mother's care, my old friend Jack Monroe privately loaned me the money using the house as collateral. We structured it like a conventional mortgage for tax purposes, but the arrangement was always between friends. Before my diagnosis, Jack and I had discussed transferring the loan to you when the time came, with very favorable terms. After I became ill, we accelerated those plans. The enclosed document is the transfer of the loan to your name, with a significant reduction in the principal as Jack's wedding gift to you. He always had a soft spot for you since you helped his daughter through that rough patch in high school. What this means, Jen, is that you essentially control the fate of the house. If Amanda tries to force a sale or take advantage, remember that the lien holder has significant power. Jack has signed everything over to you to handle as you see fit. I know this puts you in a difficult position with your sister, which is why I've kept it between us. Amanda has always had her eye on the larger prize, while you've valued the things that truly matter. The house belongs with you. The one who came home, the one who stayed, the one who cared for not just me but the legacy our family built. Use this knowledge wisely and fairly. And remember that I am proud of you, not for what you own, but for who you are. All my love, Dad enclosed with the letter was a legal document transferring the mortgage loan to my name, effectively making me both the resident of the house and the holder of the lien against it. The principal amount had been reduced by nearly half, making the monthly payments much more manageable with my growing art income. I sat back in the chair, stunned. Dad had given me not just a place to live, but a position of strength. I could never be forced out as long as I held the mortgage note. For a long moment, I considered calling Amanda to explain the situation, but something held me back. The memory of her dismissive tone, her assumption that I would fail, her eagerness to claim the house for herself. All of it suggested that sharing this information now would only lead to more conflict. Instead, I carefully refolded the letter and documents and placed them in a fireproof lockbox. This was information I would keep to myself, at least until I needed it. Until then, I would continue making the mortgage payments to myself, building up savings while maintaining the appearance of financial struggle when Amanda inquired. It wasn't entirely honest, but it gave me time. Time to strengthen my position, time to build my art business, time to fully claim my place in the house and in Pinewood, time to become someone who couldn't be easily dismissed or manipulated. As snow began to fall outside the study window, I made a decision. I would give myself 2 more years. 2 years to establish myself as an artist, to complete the major renovations on the house, to become financially secure enough that when the truth eventually came out, I would be speaking from a position of success rather than desperation. Amanda could wait. The house, my house, and I had all the time in the world. Part 2. The unfamiliar environment. The morning after discovering my father's letter, I woke up with a strange mixture of emotions swirling through me. Relief that I wasn't as financially vulnerable as I'd believed, anger at the deception that had been necessary, and an odd sense of responsibility that weighed heavier than the mortgage ever had. Dad had trusted me with this information, with the future of our family home. The question now was what to do with that trust. I made coffee. In the kitchen, watching snow accumulate on the back porch. 2 more years, I had promised myself. 2 years to transform both the house and my life before confronting Amanda. The timeline felt both generous and impossibly tight. My phone chimed with a text from Amanda. "The money hit your account yesterday. Let's discuss repayment after new." Years. I'm thinking we convert it to part of a buyout. I set the phone down without responding. Her persistence in trying to claim the house only strengthened my resolve to protect it. Later that day at the Historical Society, Diane noticed my distraction as I mislabeled 3 consecutive photographs. "Something's troubling you," she observed, gently correcting my work. "Is it the house?" I hesitated, uncertain how much to share. "I found out some new information about my father's wishes. It's complicated." Diane's weathered hands stilled on the photo she was holding. "Families often are, especially when it comes to inheritance. Your sister's still pressuring you about the house?" I nodded, surprised by her perception. "Some people see property as nothing but dollar signs," she said. "Others understand that a house can be a connection to the past and a foundation for the future. It's about more than boards and nails." "That's exactly it," I agreed. "Amanda sees the market. Value, I see. Home." Diane smiled knowingly. "Harold, your father, understood that difference between you two. It's why he always spoke about you taking over the house someday, even years ago." This was news to me. "He talked about that?" "Oh, yes. At garden club meetings, town functions. He'd mention how you had his mother's eye for beauty, how you noticed the same details in the house that she had. Amanda was always more like your grandfather, ambitious, looking toward the next opportunity." The validation that Dad had seen these differences long before his illness provided unexpected comfort. I hadn't been imagining the special connection we'd shared with the house. The thing about houses, Diane continued, is that they respond to the care they're given. Some people can live in a place for decades without ever truly inhabiting it. Others move in and within months, it's as if the house has been waiting for them all along. She patted my hand. This house was waiting for you, Jennifer. That evening, I stood in the center of the living room, seeing it with fresh eyes. Dad had maintained the house, but he'd never been one for decorating or updates. The room retained much of the same furniture and color scheme from my childhood. It was comfortable but dated, familiar but not quite mine. If I was committing to this house, to this life, I needed to make it truly reflect who I was now, not who I had been or who my parents had been. With newfound determination, I grabbed a notebook and began sketching ideas for each room, considering what to keep for its history and what to change to create my future. The next morning, armed with paint samples and a small budget set aside from my art sales, I began the transformation with the living room walls. The faded beige that had been there since the 1990s gave way to a soft sage green that brought out the details in the original crown molding. Tom arrived that weekend with his toolkit and immediate opinions on my color choice. "It's very green," he observed. "It's called Meadow Breath," I informed him, rolling another stripe up the wall. "Of course it is," he laughed, but picked up a roller to help. "So, what brought on this sudden renovation fever?" I hesitated, not ready to share my father's letter even with Tom. "Just time for a change. If I'm staying, I want it to feel like my house, not my parents' house." As Tom departed, Diane organized the remaining neighbors into a system for ensuring the vulnerable residents of our street were safe and warm. Mrs. Abernathy from 2 doors down, who had a gas stove, offered her kitchen for anyone who needed hot food. Mr. Patel, whose daughter had installed a generator the previous year, opened his basement as a charging station for phones and medical devices. I found myself designated as a check-in point for several elderly neighbors, given the central location of my house and the newly rediscovered fireplace, which was soon radiating welcome heat throughout the first floor. That evening, as darkness fell early over the frozen landscape, my living room filled with neighbors seeking warmth and company. Someone brought a guitar, someone else produced a flask of brandy to supplement Diane's Irish coffee, and impromptu fireside stories emerged as naturally as if we'd planned the gathering for weeks. I looked around the room, lit only by firelight and a few battery lanterns, and felt a strange sense of rightness. These people, some I had known since childhood, others I had only met since returning, were sharing my space, creating a momentary community within these old walls. Mrs. Abernathy, perched on the edge of my sofa, patted my hand. "Your father would love seeing the house like this," she said softly, full of life again. Later, as the gathering dispersed to various sleeping arrangements, some returning to homes with alternative heat sources, others accepting beds offered by those more fortunate, Diane remained, insisting the trek across the icy street was too dangerous in the dark. We sat by the dwindling fire, wrapped in quilts I'd found in the linen closet. "Thank you," I said, watching the flames cast dancing shadows on the newly painted walls. "I wouldn't have known what to do today without your help." Diane smiled, the firelight softening the lines of her face. "That's what neighbors do. Something your generation often forgets. We're meant to rely on each other." "I'm not sure I've ever really had that," I admitted. "Even growing up here, we kept to ourselves mostly. Dad was private, and after Mom died, we became even more isolated. In Chicago, I barely knew my neighbors' names. Well, now you know, not just names, but who makes the best sourdough bread, who can fix a generator, and who to avoid if you don't want to hear the same fishing story 3 times in one evening." She chuckled. "That's real wealth, Jennifer." The power remained out for 4 days. During that time, my house became an unofficial community center, a place for neighbors to warm up, charge essential devices using a small generator Tom delivered. On his return from Grand Rapids, and exchange information about road clearings and power restoration efforts. I learned more about Pinewood and its residents in those 4 days than I had in months of working at the Historical Society. I discovered that Mr. Patel had been a renowned oncologist before retiring, that Mrs. Abernathy had once danced with the Boston Ballet, that the quiet man who plowed everyone's driveways after snowstorms had lost his wife and daughter in a car accident 10 years earlier. These weren't just names and faces anymore. They were stories intertwined with my own. People whose lives had intersected with my family's for generations. People who had known my father, my mother, even my grandparents. People who now knew me, not as Harold Cooper's younger daughter who'd fled to Chicago, but as Jennifer, the artist who'd returned home and opened her doors when they needed shelter. When the power finally came back on, illuminating the house with harsh electric light after days of candles and firelight, I felt an odd sense of loss amid the relief. The return to normal meant the dissolution of our temporary fireside community, the end of an unexpected but precious interlude. As the last of my impromptu guests departed, Diane lingered at the door. "Don't be a stranger," she said, echoing a phrase my mother had often used. "That fireplace should stay uncovered." I nodded, understanding she meant more than just the physical fireplace. It will. The following day, my phone service restored. I received a voicemail from Michelle at the gallery. "Your work arrived safely, and we've already had interest from several collectors who saw us unpacking. The show opens next weekend. We'd love to have you attend the reception." Within the same hour, I received a text from Amanda. "Tried calling all week during the ice storm. Were you ignoring me? Kyle and I are coming to town next weekend to resolve this house situation once and for all." I looked between the two messages, so perfectly opposed in their energy and intent. The gallery invitation represented possibility, growth, connection. Amanda's demand symbolized the past, obligation, constraint. For a moment, I considered trying to reschedule one or the other. Then I realized it was time to stop contorting my life to avoid conflict with my sister. I had a professional obligation and opportunity at the gallery. Amanda would have to work around my schedule, not the other way around. I responded to Michelle with an enthusiastic acceptance of the invitation, then sent Amanda a brief message. "I'll be in Grand Rapids Saturday for a gallery opening where my work is being featured. Happy to meet Sunday afternoon if you're still in town." Her reply was immediate and frosty. "This is more important than your hobby, Jennifer. We're talking about significant financial decisions." I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the day painting, starting a new piece inspired by the firelit gatherings of the past week. By evening, I had created a canvas filled with warm light and indistinct figures, more impression than representation, capturing the feeling of community rather than its literal appearance. Looking at it, I realized how much my artistic voice had evolved since returning to Pinewood. In Chicago, I had painted what I thought would please others. Technically proficient but emotionally restrained work designed to coordinate with upscale decor. Now I was painting what moved me, what I needed to express. The resulting work was messier in some ways, less controlled, but vibrant with authentic feeling. This evolution paralleled the changes in the house and in myself. I was becoming less concerned with external appearance and more invested in creating spaces, both on canvas and in my home, that reflected genuine experience and connection. The night before the gallery opening, I stood in the center of my living room, surveying the transformation that had occurred over the past months. The sage green walls highlighted the original woodwork. Family photographs shared space with vibrant, local art I'd purchased or traded for. The furniture, rearranged for conversation rather than television viewing, still showed its age, but had been refreshed with new pillows and throws I'd found at the local thrift store. Most significantly, the fireplace now stood as the room's focal point, framed by simple floating shelves displaying meaningful objects, a piece of driftwood from the lake where Dad had taught me to swim, a small clay sculpture I'd made in high school, a framed first dollar from my earliest art sale. It wasn't perfectly coordinated or magazine-worthy, but it was authentically mine, a reflection of both where I'd come from and who I was becoming. For the first time since returning to Pinewood, I felt not that I was living in my father's house, but that I was creating my own home. The gallery opening exceeded all my expectations. Michelle had given my work prominent placement, and the attendance was substantial despite the lingering effects of the ice storm. I wore a simple black dress I'd found in a vintage shop in downtown Pinewood, paired with my mother's pearl earrings, a combination that felt like a bridge between my past and present. "There's genuine emotional depth in these interiors," one gallery visitor commented, studying my painting of the third-floor dormer room. "They feel inhabited, even without showing people." "That's exactly what I'm trying to capture," I explained, surprised and pleased by his perception. The way spaces hold our experiences, reflect our lives. By the end of the evening, red sold dots marked 8 of my 15 paintings, including the most expensive piece, a large canvas depicting the living room transformation, showing both what had been and what was emerging in a complex layering of perspective. Michelle pulled me aside as the crowd thinned. "We've had an incredible response to your work, Jennifer. I'd like to discuss representing you on an ongoing basis. These architectural interiors have struck a chord. There's something universal in the way you're depicting personal space." I stammered my thanks, overwhelmed by the validation and the possibilities it represented. The sales from tonight alone would cover several months of expenses, giving me breathing room to create more work without financial pressure. Ongoing representation could mean sustainable income from my art, something I'd dreamed of, but never seriously expected. As I drove back to Pinewood late that night, my mind whirled with possibilities. The success at the gallery had done more than validate my artistic direction. It had expanded my sense of what might be possible for my future. I wasn't just surviving in Pinewood anymore. I was building something meaningful, something that connected my talent with others who found value in it. The house awaited me, dark except for the porch light I'd left on. As I unlocked the door, I was struck by how differently I felt returning here than I had when I'd first moved back. Then, the house had represented fallback, failure, last resort. Now it felt like foundation, inspiration, possibility. Tomorrow would bring Amanda and her demands. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply savor the feeling of returning home after a personal triumph. The house seemed to welcome me, creaking familiarly as I moved through darkened rooms to my bedroom. Just before falling asleep, I received a text from Tom, who had attended the opening with his new girlfriend. "Proud of you, Jen. You're not just finding your way, you're making your way, and it's beautiful to watch." Morning came too quickly, sunshine streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close the curtains on. I allowed myself a leisurely breakfast, reliving moments from the gallery opening and planning which rooms to paint next for my continuing series. The doorbell rang at precisely noon. Amanda had always been punctual when it suited her agenda. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door to find her and Kyle on the porch, both dressed as if for a business meeting rather than a family visit. "Jennifer?" Amanda nodded coolly, stepping past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. "We have a lot to discuss." Kyle followed, his eyes scanning the renovated spaces with calculating assessment. "You've made some interesting choices with the decor," he commented. The slight pause making it clear interesting wasn't a compliment. "Would you like coffee?" I offered, determined to maintain composure. "This isn't a social call," Amanda replied, removing her designer coat and draping it over the stair railing. "We need to discuss your repayment plan and the future of the house." I led them into the living room, noticing Kyle's raised eyebrows at the fireplace that now dominated the space. "That wasn't here before," he remarked. "It was always here," I corrected. just covered up, like a lot of things in this house. The subtle reference to hidden truths was lost on them as they perched uncomfortably on the edge of my sofa, looking like corporate executives preparing to deliver bad news to an underperforming employee. Amanda opened her sleek leather portfolio, extracting a document with fluorescent sticky tabs marking various pages. "We've had the house appraised," she announced without preamble. "The current market value, even considering its age and needed repairs, is substantial. Kyle and I are prepared to buy out your residence rights at a generous percentage." I accepted the document she thrust toward me, scanning numbers that had clearly been calculated to seem impressive while significantly undervaluing both the property and my legal interest in it. "I'm not interested in selling," I said simply, handing the document back. Amanda's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "Jennifer, be reasonable. You can barely afford the mortgage payments. You had to borrow from me just to make 1 month. This offer would give you enough to start fresh somewhere more suitable for your situation." The last word hung in the air between us, laden with judgment about my career, my finances, my choices. In the past, it would have stung, making me doubt myself and my decisions. Now, it merely revealed how little she understood about what I valued. "My situation is actually quite good," I replied evenly. "My work is being represented by a gallery in Grand Rapids, and I sold 8 paintings just last night. I don't need to start fresh somewhere else. I'm exactly where I want to be." Kyle leaned forward, adopting what I assumed was his negotiating posture. "Jennifer, real estate in this area is appreciating rapidly. Emotionally, we understand your attachment to the house, but financially, this is the smart move. Take the money, invest in your art career if that's what you want." "This house is my art career," I said, gesturing to the paintings hung on the walls, the sketchbook stacked on the coffee table. "These spaces inspire my work. The light, the history, the feeling of these rooms, they're central to what I'm creating." Amanda sighed dramatically. "This isn't about your hobby paintings, Jenny. This is about significant financial assets and making adult decisions." The dismissive reference to my hobby after the success of the previous night felt like a deliberate provocation. I took a measured breath before responding. "My work is not a hobby, Amanda. It's my profession, and it's beginning to be quite successful. More importantly, though, I don't need your approval or understanding of my choices. This house is my legal residence for as long as I choose, as specified in Dad's will. A will you benefit from while I'm left with nothing but a theoretical future interest if you ever decide to leave." Amanda's voice rose slightly. "It's not fair, and you know it. I'm the oldest. I have a family, responsibilities. You're just painting pictures and playing house." The dismissal in her tone was so familiar, so expected, that it had lost much of its power to wound me. Instead, I felt a wave of sadness for the sister who had never seen me clearly, who had always been too focused on external markers of success to recognize other forms of value. "I'm sorry you feel the arrangement is unfair," I said quietly. "But it was Dad's decision, not mine." Kyle, ever the politician, sensed the conversation veering toward unproductive emotional territory. "Let's focus on the practical matters at hand," he suggested smoothly. "The loan from Amanda needs to be repaid, and the ongoing mortgage payments remain a concern. We've prepared several options for resolving these issues." He extracted another document from Amanda's portfolio, and I recognized the moment had arrived, the confrontation I'd been postponing for months. My heart raced, but a strange calm settled over me simultaneously. This was my house, my truth. It was time to claim both. "Before we continue," I said, rising from my chair, "there's something you should know about the mortgage." Part 3. The growth process. "Before we continue," I said, rising from my chair, "there's something you should know about the mortgage." Amanda's expression shifted from frustration to curiosity. Kyle's political smile remained fixed in place, but his eyes narrowed slightly. I walked to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the living room, the one piece of furniture I hadn't changed or moved since taking over the house. It had been my grandmother's, then my father's, a repository for family documents and correspondence for generations. From the bottom drawer, I removed the fireproof box where I'd stored my father's letter and the accompanying paperwork. Dad left me more than just residence rights, I explained, returning to my seat. He left me information about the mortgage that changes everything. I handed them the document transferring the mortgage to my name. Kyle, with his legal background, recognized its significance immediately. His smile disappeared as he scanned the contents, while Amanda leaned over his shoulder, her confusion evident. "I don't understand," she said, looking between the paper and me. "What is this?" Kyle cleared his throat. "It appears that your father transferred the mortgage loan to Jennifer. She's essentially both the occupant and the lien holder." He turned. To me, professional assessment replacing his earlier condescension. "How long have you had this?" "I found it a few months ago," I admitted. Dad left it in a hidden compartment in his desk along with a letter explaining his wishes. Amanda snatched the document from Kyle's hands. "This can't be legal. Dad wouldn't cut me out like this." "He didn't cut you out," I explained patiently. "The house still belongs to both of us if I ever choose to leave. But he wanted to ensure I couldn't be forced out against my will." "Against your will?" Amanda's voice rose. "Who was forcing you out? We made a generous offer." "An offer I didn't ask for or want," I pointed out. "And you've been pressuring me about the house since before Dad's funeral." Kyle placed a restraining hand on Amanda's arm, his legal mind clearly calculating this new reality. "The document appears legitimate," he said quietly. "If Jennifer holds the mortgage note, our leverage is significantly reduced." "Leverage?" I repeated, the word crystallizing everything wrong with their approach. "Is that how you see family? Relationships as points of leverage?" Amanda stood abruptly, pacing the room with agitated steps. "This is so typical," she fumed. "You were always Dad's favorite, always the special one who needed extra protection and consideration." The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed how deeply Amanda had misunderstood both me and our father. "That's not what this was about," I said. "Dad knew you have your own life, your own success. This house wasn't important to you until you saw it as an asset to be acquired." Kyle, ever practical, attempted to steer the conversation back to concrete terms. "Regardless of the emotions involved, we need to address the financial realities. Jennifer, are you planning to call in Amanda's loan?" I shook my head. "That was never my intention. In fact, I'd like to repay it from the proceeds of my art sales." I turned to face my sister directly. "I don't want your money, Amanda. I just want to keep my home." For a brief moment, something flickered in Amanda's eyes. Perhaps recognition of my sincerity, or maybe just calculation of her limited options. Then her expression hardened once more. "This isn't over," she declared, gathering her coat and portfolio. "Dad's decision may not have been made with full capacity. His illness." "Don't go there," I interrupted, a rare flash of anger breaking through my composure. "Don't you dare suggest Dad wasn't thinking clearly when he made provisions for this house. He knew exactly what he was doing and why." Kyle, sensing the conversation had reached an unproductive point, guided Amanda toward the door. "We should consult with our attorney before continuing this discussion," he murmured. "Review our options." At the threshold, Amanda turned back, her expression a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and something that might have been hurt. "You've changed, Jennifer," she said, as if making an accusation. I met her gaze steadily. "Yes," I agreed. "I have." After they left, I sat alone in the quietness of the living room, emotions swirling like storm clouds. The confrontation had gone differently than I'd imagined during those months of preparation. I'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt a complicated sadness for the relationship with my sister that seemed more damaged than ever. The phone rang, breaking my reverie. It was Michelle from the gallery. "Jennifer, wonderful news. 2 more of your pieces sold this morning, and we've had an inquiry about commissioning work for a historic home renovation in Holland. Are you interested?" The question pulled me back from the emotional aftermath of Amanda's visit to the concrete reality of my evolving career. "Yes," I said, feeling my spirits lift. "I'm definitely interested." Over the following week, I channeled my conflicted feelings about Amanda into my work, producing 3 new paintings in a flurry of creative energy. The commission inquiry developed into a concrete project, creating paintings of a restored 19th century home for the owners who wanted to document the renovation process through art. Tom stopped by on Saturday, curious about the confrontation with Amanda that I'd mentioned only briefly via text. "So you finally showed your cards," he said, helping himself to coffee in the kitchen. "How did the evil queen take it?" I shot him a reproachful look. "She's not evil, Tom. She's just Amanda." "Right, and Darth Vader was just misunderstood." He grinned, but then sobered at my expression. "Sorry, but seriously, how did it—" "Oh?" I sighed, leaning against the counter. "About as well as you'd expect." She was shocked, then angry. Kyle started strategizing immediately. They left talking about consulting their attorney. Tom frowned. "Can they challenge the mortgage transfer?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I should probably get legal advice myself, but the document seemed pretty straightforward, and Dad's friend Jack Monroe handled the whole thing." "Jack Monroe?" Tom's eyebrows rose. "The Jack Monroe who runs like half the real estate developments in the county? That's who held your dad's mortgage?" I nodded, realizing I'd never made the connection. "They were friends from way back. The letter said Jack had a soft spot for me because I helped his daughter through something in high school." Tom snapped his fingers in recognition. "Claire Monroe. I remember her. Had that rough time after her parents' divorce. You two were in art club together." "That's right," I said, memory returning. "She was struggling with depression, and we bonded over painting. I'd forgotten that was Jack's daughter." "Small towns," Tom shrugged. "Everyone's connected somehow." The observation lingered with me after Tom left. Everyone's connected somehow. In the months since returning to Pinewood, I'd rediscovered those connections, to people, to places, to histories intertwined with my own. Each connection had strengthened me, grounding me more firmly in this place I'd once been so eager to escape. The following Monday, I received a formal letter from Amanda and Kyle's attorney, requesting copies of all documentation related to the mortgage transfer and suggesting a mediated family discussion rather than pursuing more adversarial legal remedies. The implied threat was clear, but so was the underlying reality. They weren't sure they had a strong legal position. I responded with a brief note agreeing to provide the requested documentation and consider mediation after consulting my own attorney. Finding legal representation proved easier than expected. Diane, as usual, had a suggestion. "You should talk to Sarah Easton," she advised when I mentioned the situation during our lunch break at the Historical Society. "She handled Harold's estate planning initially, before he switched to Goldstein. She understands the background." Sarah Easton's office was located in a converted Victorian house on Elm Street, its interior retaining the residence's original character while functioning efficiently as a professional space. I immediately added it to my mental list of interiors to paint. Sarah herself was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with a straightforward manner that put me at ease. After reviewing the documents I'd brought, she leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. The mortgage transfer appears completely legitimate, she confirmed. Jack Monroe is a savvy businessman who would have ensured everything was properly executed. Your sister's claim about your father's capacity during his illness is tenuous at best, given that these arrangements were made before his diagnosis. So they don't have a case? I asked, relief washing over me. Sarah's expression remained measured. I didn't say that. Family disputes are rarely just about the legal merits. They're about relationships, history, perceptions of fairness. Your sister feels she's been treated unfairly, regardless of what the documents say. I sighed, recognizing the truth in her assessment. So, what do you suggest? Provide the documentation they've requested, which shows you have nothing to hide. Then, if you're open to it, consider the mediation. Not because you're legally obligated, but because resolving this without a protracted legal battle would be better for everyone. I nodded slowly. And if mediation doesn't work? Sarah smiled slightly. Then we defend your position vigorously. But let's cross that bridge if we come to it. With Sarah's guidance, I assembled copies of all relevant documents, including my father's letter, and sent them to Amanda's attorney. Then I returned my focus to what was becoming increasingly meaningful work, both my painting and the ongoing restoration of the house. The commission for the historic home in Holland led to a site visit, where I spent a day photographing and sketching the property from various angles. The owners, a couple in their 50s who had devoted 3 years to meticulously restoring the lakeside Victorian, shared my appreciation for how spaces evolve while maintaining their essential character. We didn't want to erase the home's history, the wife explained as she showed me original features they'd preserved alongside necessary modernizations. Each generation that lived here left their mark, and we wanted to honor that while adding our own chapter. Her words resonated deeply with my approach to my own house. I wasn't erasing my parents' presence or the generations before them. I was adding my own layer to the ongoing story of the place. This perspective influenced my work on the commission, resulting in paintings that captured both the physical reality of the restored home and the more elusive sense of continuity amid change. When I delivered the finished pieces a month later, the couple was visibly moved. "You've captured exactly what we felt but couldn't express," the husband said, studying a canvas that showed the transition from old to new in the home's kitchen space. How the past remains present, even as things transform. Their response affirmed what Michelle at the gallery had recognized, that my work was touching something universal in how people relate to personal spaces. As I drove back to Pinewood that evening, I found myself thinking about Amanda and our conflicting relationships with our family home. For me, the house had become a vessel for growth and creative expression. For Amanda, it represented something different. Perhaps a tangible connection to our parents that she felt she was being denied, or simply an asset she believed she deserved. Understanding the emotional underpinnings of her position didn't change my resolve to protect my home, but it did soften my anger at her attempts to claim it. Spring arrived with its customary Michigan fickleness, warm, sunny days interspersed with sudden snow flurries and biting winds. The garden that had lain dormant through winter began showing tentative signs of life, crocuses pushing through half-frozen soil, buds forming on the lilac bushes that lined the side yard. I found myself increasingly drawn to the outdoor spaces of the property, seeing the gardens as a natural extension of the interior transformation I'd been focused on. Like the house, the grounds had been maintained but not truly tended during my father's final years. Flower beds had become overgrown, pathways cracked and heaved from frost, the small pond at the back of the property choked with leaves and debris. With the same careful attention I'd given to the interior rooms, I began reclaiming these outdoor spaces, starting with the small brick patio outside the kitchen door. Years of neglect had left it uneven and weed-choked, but beneath the accumulated grime lay a beautifully patterned surface laid by my great-grandfather in the 1940s. Diane, observing my efforts one afternoon as she dropped off Historical Society, Newsletters shared yet another piece of family history I'd never known. "Your great-grandmother designed that pattern," she noted, watching me scrub decades of dirt from the bricks. "Margaret was quite the artist herself. She sketched the design and had your great-grandfather execute it exactly to her specifications. It caused quite a row between them, from what my mother told me." I sat back on my heels, studying the geometric pattern with newfound appreciation. I had no idea. Dad never mentioned it. "Harold wouldn't have known," Diane said. "That generation didn't talk much about family squabbles or women's contributions. But my mother and yours used to discuss it when they were in garden club together. Your mother always said she felt Margaret's artistic spirit in this garden. The revelation that my creative leanings might have deeper roots than I'd realized, not just from my father's aesthetic appreciation, but from a great-grandmother who had imposed her artistic vision on her physical surroundings, felt like discovering a missing puzzle piece in my understanding of myself. With renewed enthusiasm, I expanded my restoration efforts to the entire yard, uncovering other touches that now seemed clearly attributable to Margaret's influence. The unusual curved pathway leading to what had once been a rose garden, the strategic placement of flowering shrubs to create what gardeners call rooms within the landscape. As I worked, I found myself imagining this woman I'd never met, imposing her artistic vision on her surroundings just as I was doing, separated by generations, but connected by similar impulses. In my mind, she became a kind of spiritual mentor, guiding my choices as I restored what she had created and adding my own contributions to her foundation. My outdoor efforts attracted attention from neighbors, who began stopping by with plant divisions from their own gardens, advice about local growing conditions, and occasionally physical help with the heavier tasks. Mr. Patel, whose immaculate garden I had admired from afar, appeared one Saturday morning with several heirloom vegetable seedlings and proceeded to demonstrate the proper way to prepare soil for tomatoes. "The secret is eggshells," he confided, crushing them into the dirt with practiced hands. "Calcium prevents blossom end rot." These casual interactions gradually wove me more deeply into the community fabric. I was no longer just Harold Cooper's daughter who had returned after fleeing to Chicago, no longer merely the artist who lived in the old Cooper place. I was becoming Jennifer in my own right, a neighbor who shared surplus zucchini, who helped with the Historical Society's spring fundraiser, who painted local scenes that captured familiar places in new ways. In late April, Michelle called with news that a regional arts publication wanted to feature my work in an article about emerging Michigan artists. "They're particularly interested in how your architectural interiors and garden paintings reflect themes of renewal and transformation," she explained. "They'd like to interview you and photograph both your work and your own renovated spaces, since they've become so central to your artistic practice." The opportunity was flattering, but also somewhat intimidating. The house and gardens, while significantly improved, were still works in progress. More concerning was the prospect of publicly revealing aspects of my personal journey that remained tender and private. Tom, as usual, cut through my hesitation with his trademark bluntness when I called to discuss my concerns. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You're worried about being featured in a magazine that could boost your career and validate everything you've been working toward? Jen, sometimes I wonder about your self-preservation instincts." "It's not that simple," I protested. "The house isn't finished, my work is still evolving, and they want personal background for context. It feels exposing." "That's kind of the point of profiles," he observed dryly. "Look, you don't have to tell them everything, but your story is compelling. Coming home, rediscovering yourself through renovating this place, finding artistic success in the process. That's the kind of narrative people connect with." He was right, of course. After sleeping on the decision, I called Michelle back and agreed to the interview, setting a date 3 weeks out to give me time to complete a few more pressing projects around the house. The following day, a less welcome communication arrived, a formal invitation to the mediation session Amanda's attorney had proposed. The suggested date was just 2 days before my scheduled interview and photo shoot. I called Sarah Easton for advice, wondering if I should try to reschedule one or the other. Keep both appointments, she recommended after considering the situation. The timing might actually work in your favor. Going into mediation with a pending profile about your work and its connection to the house reinforces your legitimate attachment to the property. It's not just about financial interest, it's about your professional identity. Sarah's strategic thinking made sense, but it meant I would be facing an emotionally challenging confrontation with my sister immediately before opening my home and work to public scrutiny. The prospect left me feeling vulnerable on multiple fronts. That evening, seeking perspective, I visited the property's small family cemetery plot, a tradition dating back to when the original farmhouse had been built in the 1870s. Located in a quiet corner behind a stand of ancient maple trees, the modest plot contained the graves of 4 generations of Coopers, including my parents. I hadn't visited often since the funeral, finding the tangible reminder of loss too painful in those early months. Now, with spring softening the landscape and new challenges looming, I felt drawn to this physical connection to my family's history. Sitting on a stone bench beside my parents' graves, I spoke aloud as if they could hear me, sharing my concerns about the upcoming mediation and the magazine feature, my progress with the house, my evolving artistic identity. The one-sided conversation felt both foolish and comforting, a way of processing my thoughts while maintaining a connection to those who had shaped me. "I wish you could see what I'm doing with the place," I said, addressing my father's headstone. "I think you'd approve of most of it, though maybe not the purple door." The door in question, the kitchen entrance that opened onto the newly restored patio, had been an impulse decision, a vibrant aubergine that complemented the brick pattern while making a distinctly contemporary statement. Every time I approached the house from the garden, the unexpected color gave me a small jolt of pleasure, a reminder that tradition and innovation could coexist harmoniously. As I rose to leave, a strange certainty settled over me, that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Whatever challenges the coming weeks might bring, I would face them from a position of authentic purpose rather than defensive reaction. This clarity carried me through the final preparations for both the mediation and the interview. I completed the kitchen renovation that had been half-finished for months, finally replacing the dated countertops with butcher block surfaces that honored the home's age, while improving its functionality. I framed several new paintings for the magazine photo shoot, selecting pieces that best represented my artistic evolution. The day before the mediation, I received an unexpected visitor. Claire Monroe, Jack's daughter, whom I'd helped through a difficult period in high school, appeared at my door with a small wrapped package. "Dad mentioned he'd transferred the mortgage to you," she explained after initial greetings and catching up. "He also heard through the local grapevine that there might be some family dispute about it. He wanted you to have this." The package contained a folder of additional documentation, copies of the original loan agreement between Jack and my father, subsequent modifications they'd made, and a personal letter from Jack confirming that the transfer had been my father's explicit wish, conceived well before his illness. "Dad doesn't like to get involved in family disputes," Claire explained, "but he wanted to make sure you had everything you might need if questions arose about his arrangement with your father." Her thoughtfulness, and Jack's, left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you," I finally managed. "This means more than I can say." Claire smiled, glancing around at the transformed living room. "The house looks amazing, by the way. I barely recognize it, but somehow it also feels more itself, if that makes sense." Her observation echoed my own feelings so precisely that I laughed. That's exactly what I've been trying to achieve, honoring what it was while allowing it to become something new. After she left, I reviewed the documents she had brought, then forwarded copies to Sarah. Her response was immediate. This strengthens our position considerably. Jack Monroe's confirmation of your father's intentions and the timeline will be difficult to challenge. The morning of the mediation dawned clear and mild. Perfect weather for the half-hour drive to the neutral location both parties had agreed upon, a conference room at a hotel in the next county. Sarah met me in the lobby, projecting calm confidence as we waited for Amanda, Kyle, and their attorney to arrive. "Remember," she advised quietly, "this isn't a courtroom. The mediator isn't a judge. Their role is to help facilitate a mutually acceptable resolution, not to impose one. Stay focused on what matters to you, and don't get derailed by emotional provocations." I nodded, grateful for her steadying presence. Despite my preparation and growing confidence, facing Amanda in this formal context remained daunting. When they entered the lobby, Amanda looked immaculate as always, though I noticed tension in the set of her shoulders. Kyle maintained his politician's facade of affable confidence, but the tight grip on his briefcase suggested underlying stress. Their attorney, a middle-aged man with an aggressive haircut and expensive suit, completed the intimidating tableau. The mediator, a retired judge with a reputation for handling family disputes with firm impartiality, greeted us all with professional courtesy and outlined the process we would follow. Each side would present their position, supporting documentation, would be reviewed, and then we would work toward identifying possible resolutions. Amanda's attorney spoke first, presenting a narrative that characterized my father's decisions as unfair to his older daughter and potentially influenced by his illness, despite the timeline established by the documentation. He emphasized Amanda's long-term financial contributions to family expenses and portrayed me as having taken advantage of my position as the child who had returned home. I listened without interrupting, noting how the presentation carefully avoided mentioning certain facts: that Amanda had visited our father only twice during his illness, that she had shown no interest in the house until after his death, that her contributions had primarily been gifts to herself using joint accounts. When it was Sarah's turn, she presented our position with calm precision, highlighting the legality of the mortgage transfer, my father's clear intentions as expressed in his letter, and Jack Monroe's confirmation of both the arrangement and its timing. She emphasized my ongoing investment in maintaining and improving the property, as well as the central role it now played in my professional work as an artist. Far from taking advantage, she concluded, Jennifer has honored her father's wishes by creating exactly what he hoped for: a home that remains in the family, cared for by someone who truly values it, while continuing the property's legacy of nurturing creativity and community. The mediator reviewed the documentation from both sides, asking clarifying questions that revealed his thorough engagement with the details. When he had finished, he addressed us directly rather than through our attorneys. "I'd like to hear from each of you personally," he said. "Not about the legal arguments, which your counsel has presented admirably, but about what this house means to you and what resolution you're seeking. Ms. Cooper-Wilson, would you begin?" Amanda straightened in her chair, her expression a careful blend of reason and restrained emotion. "The house represents our family heritage," she began. "Our father's decision to allow Jennifer lifetime residence while denying me any current benefit from a significant family asset creates an imbalance that feels deeply unfair. I'm not trying to force my sister from her home out of malice. I simply believe that family assets should be divided equitably." The mediator nodded thoughtfully. "And what resolution would satisfy your sense of equity?" "Either Jennifer should purchase my interest in the property at fair market value, or we should sell it and divide the proceeds," Amanda replied. "Alternatively, she could compensate me with regular payments representing my share of the property's value." "Thank you," the mediator said, then turned to me. "Ms. Cooper, what does the house mean to you, and what resolution are you seeking?" I took a deep breath, seeking words that might bridge the gulf between my sister's perspective and my own. "The house has become central to who I am and what I do," I began. It's not just shelter or an asset. It's the foundation of my artistic practice, the subject of my work, the physical manifestation of my journey over these past 2 years. I described how the process of restoring and reimagining the house had paralleled my own personal reconstruction after returning to Pinewood, how each renovated room and reclaimed garden space represented not just physical improvement, but emotional healing. As for resolution, I continued, I want to honor both Dad's wishes and Amanda's legitimate desire for fairness. I can't afford to buy her out at market value, and I won't agree to sell. But I am willing to make arrangements to ensure she benefits from the value I'm adding to the property through my improvements, either through graduated payments over time or a greater share of proceeds if I ever do choose to sell. The mediator considered both our statements before proposing a structure for further discussion. It seems to me, he observed, that we have two legitimate interests here that are not entirely incompatible. Jennifer's connection to the house, as both residence and creative wellspring, is substantive and meaningful. Amanda's desire for equitable treatment as a co-inheritor is also valid. For the next 2 hours, we explored various possible arrangements, ways Amanda might receive financial benefit from the property without requiring me to leave or sell. The discussion remained mostly civil, though tension flared occasionally when emotional undercurrents broke through the surface. Finally, the mediator proposed a comprehensive solution. I would retain lifetime residence rights as specified in our father's will. I would make quarterly payments to Amanda, representing a fair rental value for her half interest in the property, with the amount adjusted based on my fluctuating income from art sales. These payments would accumulate as equity, gradually buying out Amanda's interest over a 15-year period. Additionally, should I decide to sell before the buyout was complete, Amanda would receive her remaining interest plus a percentage of the increased value attributable to my renovations. This approach, the mediator explained, allows Jennifer to remain in the home that has become integral to her life and work, while ensuring Amanda receives ongoing financial benefit and eventual full compensation for her interest. It respects both the letter of your father's wishes and the spirit of fairness between siblings. After private consultations with our respective attorneys, both Amanda and I tentatively agreed to the framework, with details to be finalized in a formal agreement our lawyers would draft together. As we gathered our belongings at the conclusion of the session, Amanda approached me directly for the first time since entering the room. "The purple door is a bit much," she said, referencing photos of the house Sarah had presented during our case. I laughed, surprised by the personal comment amid the legal formalities. "I thought you might say that." For a brief moment, something, like our old connection, flickered between us, the shared understanding that comes from growing up in the same household, knowing each other's predictable reactions and preferences. "I saw your paintings," she added, nodding toward the portfolio Sarah had brought. "They're good, Jenny. Really good. I didn't realize." She trailed off, but I understood what she hadn't said. She hadn't realized my art was legitimate, professional, worthy of respect. The acknowledgement, however reluctant, felt like the first tentative step toward a new understanding between us. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." As we parted in the hotel lobby, the mediation having achieved its purpose of finding a workable compromise, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The house was secure. My relationship with Amanda, while still complicated, had potential for healing. And tomorrow, I would share my work and my transformed home with the wider world. Driving back to Pinewood, I found myself thinking not about all that had happened, but about what would come next. New paintings I wanted to create, garden projects waiting for attention, community connections continuing to deepen. For the first time since returning to my hometown, I was looking forward rather than backward, planning for a future I was actively choosing rather than accepting by default. The revelation almost made me miss my turn, and I laughed at myself as I corrected course. The road home was familiar now, every curve and landmark recognized without conscious thought. I belonged here, Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I had found where I was meant to be. Part 5. The Defining Moment. Christmas Eve arrived with picture-perfect snowfall, transforming Pinewood into a scene worthy of a holiday card. I spent the morning making final preparations, arranging fresh greenery on the mantelpiece, setting out guest towels in the recently renovated upstairs bathroom, checking the refrigerator one last time to ensure I had all ingredients for tomorrow's dinner. The house felt ready, peaceful yet expectant, like a stage set for a performance that had been long rehearsed, but would contain inevitable moments of improvisation. I had done all I could to create a welcoming environment. What happened within, it would unfold according to its own dynamic. Amanda had texted that morning to confirm their arrival time, late afternoon, depending on road conditions. Her message included a surprising postscript. The kids are excited about staying in Dad's house. Thanks for making this happen. The simple acknowledgement of shared connection to the property. Dad's house, rather than your house, or the house I should own, suggested a subtle but significant shift in her perspective. Perhaps the legal resolution of our conflict had created space for more generous emotional responses. Or maybe the approaching holiday had softened her habitual competitiveness. Whatever the reason, I welcomed this hint of warmth. As midday approached, unexpected visitors arrived. Diane and several other neighbors bearing holiday treats and small gifts. We wanted to stop by before your family arrives, Diane explained, presenting a beautifully wrapped package. Just a little something to celebrate your first Christmas hosting in the renovated house. The impromptu gathering filled the kitchen, with laughter and conversation as neighbors admired recent improvements and shared community news. Mr. Patel brought homemade samosas, explaining that while not traditional Christmas fare, they had become his contribution to neighborhood celebrations. Over his 20 years in Pinewood, Mrs. Abernathy delivered her legendary rum cake with strict instructions about proper serving temperature. Their easy presence in my home, their genuine interest in my work and renovations, their uncomplicated affection, all reinforced how thoroughly I had been woven into the community fabric during the past year. These connections, absent from my Chicago life despite years of residence there, had developed naturally here through daily interactions, shared challenges like the ice storm, and mutual support through various life transitions. We won't stay long, Diane assured me, sensing my mind running through remaining preparations. We just wanted you to know we're all thinking of you, hoping things go well with your sister. The fact that they knew about the complex dynamics with Amanda without my having explicitly explained them, reminded me of both the challenges and comforts of small-town life. Privacy was limited, but so was isolation. People noticed, people cared, people showed up. After they departed, leaving the kitchen fragrant with cinnamon and cardamom from Mr. Patel's offerings, I moved through final preparations with renewed energy. Their visit had shifted my emotional state from focused tension to grateful anticipation, reminding me that whatever happened with Amanda, I had created genuine connections here that would remain. The house looked beautiful, the original architectural details highlighted by thoughtful renovation. My paintings displayed on walls now painted in colors that enhanced rather than competed with their tones, fresh flowers and greenery bringing life to carefully arranged spaces. More importantly, it felt like a true reflection of who I had become, neither rejecting tradition nor bound by it, appreciating history while remaining present to current possibility. At 4:30, headlights swept across the front window. As Amanda's SUV pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, centering myself in all I had learned and become over the past year, then opened the front door to welcome my sister and her family. Kyle emerged first, immediately assessing the fresh exterior paint and restored porch details with an appraising eye. Amanda followed, elegant even in travel clothes, her expression guarded but not hostile. Their children, Jason, 16, and visibly reluctant to be there, and Sophie, 12 and wide-eyed with curiosity, tumbled out last, immediately commenting on the snow-covered garden structures visible from the driveway. "The famous purple door?" Amanda asked, nodding toward the side entrance visible from where we stood. "In all its controversial glory," I confirmed, surprised to find myself smiling genuinely. "Come in. It's freezing out here." The next moments unfolded in the familiar awkwardness of family members who share history but not daily life. Coats being removed, suitcases deposited, polite comments exchanged about the drive and the weather. I showed them to their rooms, Jason in what had been my childhood bedroom, Sophie in the third-floor space I had converted from storage to a charming dormer room, Amanda and Kyle in the main guest suite with its newly renovated bathroom. "This is not what I expected," Amanda admitted as she surveyed the guest room with its carefully balanced blend of original features and contemporary comforts. "When did you develop an eye for design?" "Apparently, it was always there, just waiting for the right project," I replied, indicating the space for their luggage. "The bathroom's through there. I just finished the tile work last month." Kyle examined the custom shelving I had built into what had previously been an awkward alcove. "This is quality work. Did you hire a carpenter?" "I did it myself," I said, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "Tom helped with the initial framing, but the finishing is all mine." Something shifted in Kyle's expression, a reassessment, perhaps recognition of competence he hadn't previously attributed to me. "Impressive," he said simply, the single word carrying more genuine respect than any of our previous interactions. Downstairs, Sophie had discovered my studio and was examining the paintings with intense concentration. "You did all these?" she asked as I entered, her tone suggesting she had expected something less accomplished. "Most of them," I confirmed, though there are works by other local artists throughout the house as well. "They're really good," she said with the unfiltered honesty of early adolescence. "Mom said you were painting, but I thought it would be, like hobby stuff. These look professional." "They are professional," Jason corrected, entering behind me. "Aunt Jen's in magazines and galleries and stuff. Mom showed us the article." The casual confirmation that Amanda had not only seen my feature but shared it with her children, apparently without dismissive commentary, was unexpectedly touching. Whatever her personal feelings about my choices, she had presented my work to her children as legitimate accomplishment. "Is that our grandparents' house?" Sophie asked, pointing to one of the interior paintings that showed the living room at Tia, different stages of renovation. "It is," I confirmed. This series shows how spaces evolve over time, how they hold both past and present simultaneously. Sophie nodded seriously, studying the canvas. "It's like you can see both what it was and what it is now all at once." Her perception, so accurately capturing what I had been trying to express, caught me by surprise. "That's exactly the idea," I said, regarding my niece with new appreciation. "Have you done much art yourself?" The question opened a flood of enthusiastic description of her school art projects, revealing both genuine interest and substantial talent that had apparently gone largely unnoticed in her achievement-oriented household. As she spoke, Amanda appeared in the doorway, watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. "Sophie's art teacher suggested she apply to a summer program at the state university," she said when her daughter paused for breath. "But we weren't sure if it was worth the investment." The comment could have been interpreted as dismissive of artistic pursuits, but something in Amanda's tone suggested she was actually seeking my opinion rather than disparaging her daughter's interest. "I'd be happy to look at her portfolio if that would help," I offered. "The program might be valuable if she's really interested in developing her skills." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe during this visit," she suggested, meeting her daughter's suddenly hopeful gaze, "if your aunt doesn't mind." The exchange marked another subtle shift in our dynamic, Amanda acknowledging my professional expertise in an area where she lacked confidence, opening a potential avenue for meaningful connection beyond our complicated history. The evening progressed more smoothly than I had dared hope. We ordered pizza from the local place that had been our favorite growing up, a tradition our parents had maintained for Christmas Eve throughout our childhood. The familiar ritual seemed to ease lingering tension, creating a foundation of shared memory upon which new interactions could build. After dinner, Kyle surprised everyone by producing a deck of cards and suggesting the game our father had always insisted on during holiday gatherings. As we played around the kitchen table, the atmosphere gradually relaxed into something approaching genuine enjoyment rather than polite obligation. Remember when Dad used to let us stay up until midnight on Christmas Eve, and Mom would pretend to be scandalized by it? Amanda asked during a break in the game, her expression softening with the memory. And he'd make that awful eggnog that was basically just melted ice cream with nutmeg, I added, laughing at the recollection. Is that why there's a carton of vanilla ice cream in your freezer? Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. Planning to poison us with Grandpa's recipe? The moment of shared laughter felt like a small miracle, family connection briefly transcending the tensions and conflicts that had dominated our recent interactions. We were, for that moment at least, simply people who shared history and blood, finding comfort in common memory. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Amanda joined me on the porch where I had stepped out to enjoy the stillness of the snow-covered night. She wrapped her coat tightly against the cold, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. You've done something remarkable with the house, she said after a moment of silence. It's still clearly the place we grew up, but it's also undeniably yours now. The acknowledgement, so different from her dismissive attitude the previous Christmas, seemed to require a response that neither brushed it off nor overemphasized its significance. It's been a process, I said simply. Finding the balance between honoring what was here and creating something that reflects who I am now. Amanda nodded, her gaze fixed on the snow-covered garden. I didn't understand that a year ago. I just saw a valuable asset that should be divided equally. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I still think Dad's arrangement wasn't entirely fair to me, but I can see now why he made the decisions he did. The admission, perhaps the closest Amanda would ever come to acknowledging the rightness of my connection to the house, hung between us in the cold air. Rather than rushing to fill the space with reassurance or justification, I let the moment breathe, allowing her words their full weight. The thing is, she continued after a moment, you needed this place in a way I didn't. I have my life in Chicago, my career, my family. This was never going to be my home again. Not really. I just couldn't see that when I felt like I was being overlooked. You weren't overlooked, I said quietly. Dad knew you had created your own foundations. I was the one still figuring out where I belonged. She turned to face me then, her expression more open than I had seen it in years. And you belong here. That's obvious now. Even the kids can see it. The simple validation, from the sister who had so often made me feel inadequate or peripheral, affected me more deeply than I had anticipated. Thank you, I said, my voice catching slightly. That means a lot, coming from you. Amanda's smile held a hint of her old competitive edge, but tempered now with something like genuine affection. Don't get used to it. I'm still the successful sister with the real job and 401k. I laughed, recognizing the teasing for what it was. Not dismissal, but a return to the complicated but fundamental sibling dynamic that had shaped us both. And I'm still the artistic dreamer who can't match her socks. Some things never change. But some things do, she replied, her tone serious again. You've found your way, Jenny. It's not the path I would have chosen, but it's clearly the right one for you. We stood together in companionable silence for another moment before the cold drove us back inside. The conversation hadn't erased decades of complex history or fully resolved our different perspectives on family and success. but it had acknowledged our distinct paths without elevating either as superior, a significant evolution from the hierarchy of achievement that had characterized our relationship for as long as I could remember. Christmas morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that turned the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling display of light and shadow. I rose early, enjoying the quiet house before the day's festivities began. In the kitchen, I prepared coffee and set out the ingredients for the traditional family breakfast my mother had always made. Cinnamon rolls rising on the counter, fruit waiting to be cut, bacon ready for the oven. As I worked, I was struck by how different this Christmas felt from the previous one, when Amanda's claim to the house had shattered my tentative sense of security. Then, I had been defensive and fearful, uncertain of my place literally and figuratively. Now, I moved through preparations with quiet confidence, secure in both my legal right to the property and, more importantly, my authentic connection to it. Sophie appeared first, still in pajamas, drawn by the scent of coffee and baking cinnamon. "This kitchen is so cool," she observed, running her hand along the butcher block countertop I had installed. "Mom's is all stainless and marble. It looks like a laboratory." I smiled at the apt description of my sister's preference for sleek, contemporary design. "Different styles suit different people," I said, handing her a mug of hot chocolate. "Your mom's kitchen is probably more efficient." "Maybe," Sophie acknowledged, "but this one feels like people actually cook there. Like real food, not just takeout arranged on fancy plates." The observation was more perceptive than she likely realized, capturing something essential about the difference between Amanda's approach to domesticity and my own. Where she valued appearance and efficiency, I had prioritized warmth and functionality, neither inherently superior, just expressions of different values. The others joined us gradually, creating the pleasant chaos of family holiday morning. Jason still half asleep and communicating primarily in grunts, Kyle checking news on his phone while accepting coffee gratefully, Amanda immediately noticing and commenting on the vintage plates I had set out for breakfast. "Mom's Christmas china," she said, running a finger along the gold rim of a plate. "I didn't know you had these." "Found them in the attic last month," I explained. "They needed a good cleaning, but they were in perfect condition otherwise." Amanda picked up a cup, examining the delicate pattern. "I always loved these, but they seemed so fussy for modern life. Trust you to bring them back and make them actually work with everything else." The comment contained both her characteristic judgment and genuine appreciation, a combination that no longer stung as it once had. "I'm all about making the old and new work together," I said lightly, sliding the cinnamon rolls into the oven. After breakfast, we gathered in the living room for gift exchanges. I had carefully selected presents that reflected thoughtful attention rather than extravagance. Books chosen for each person's specific interests, small artworks by local craftspeople, experience gifts like cooking classes for Kyle, who, Amanda had mentioned, had recently developed an interest in weekend culinary experiments. Amanda and Kyle's gifts to me revealed similar consideration. Professional quality brushes I had admired in an art supply catalog, a beautifully bound sketchbook, a vintage gardening book featuring traditional landscape designs similar to what I had discovered for our property. The selections showed they had paid attention to what mattered in my current life, rather than imposing their own preferences or assumptions. The atmosphere remained relaxed as we moved to the dining room for Christmas dinner. The meal I had prepared honored traditions from our childhood while incorporating new elements that reflected my own evolving tastes. The table setting balanced the formal, mother's china, grandmother's silver, with the casual, simple linen napkins, a centerpiece of natural elements gathered from the garden, creating an environment that felt special without being stiff. As we settled into conversation over dessert, Kyle unexpectedly raised his glass in a toast. "To Jennifer," he said, his politician's delivery softened by what seemed like genuine sentiment, "for creating this beautiful space and bringing the family together. A year ago, I wouldn't have predicted we'd be sitting here like this. But I'm glad we are. The acknowledgement of our previous conflict and current detente hung briefly in the air before Amanda added her own words. And to the house itself, for remaining in the family and continuing to evolve with each generation. The toast captured precisely what I had hoped for in hosting this Christmas gathering. Not erasure of our differences or conflicts, but recognition of the possibility for growth and change within the context of shared history. We were not pretending. The previous year's confrontation hadn't happened. We were acknowledging that we had found a way forward despite it. After dinner, as dusk gathered and the Christmas tree lights created a warm glow in the living room, I found myself alone with Amanda once more. The kids were exploring the attic, fascinated by the trunks of family memorabilia I had organized, but intentionally left for them to discover. Kyle had taken a business call that apparently couldn't wait, even for Christmas Day. "I need to show you something," I said, making a spontaneous decision. "Bundle up, it's outside." Amanda raised an eyebrow but followed me without question, wrapping herself in her coat and boots. I led her through the garden, solar lights illuminating our path, to the small family cemetery plot behind the maple trees. "I've been restoring this area too," I explained as we approached the wrought iron fence that enclosed the graves of 4 generations of Coopers. It seemed important to honor this part of the property's history alongside everything else. The plot looked beautiful in the winter twilight, headstones cleaned and leveled, paths cleared of overgrowth, simple evergreen wreaths placed on each grave. Our parents' shared marker, prominently placed in the central row, had been carefully restored to remove lichen and staining. "It's peaceful," Amanda said softly, taking in the scene. "I should have visited more often." "We both should have," I acknowledged, standing beside her in the gathering darkness. "But we're here now." The moment felt significant. 2 sisters with complicated history, standing together at the physical representation of their shared ancestry, acknowledging both what had been lost and what remained possible. We were not suddenly best friends, or completely aligned in our perspectives, but we were finding ways to occupy shared space without resentment or competition dominating the interaction. "Dad would be pleased about all of this," Amanda said after a moment of silence. "Not just the house and your work, but this. Us managing to be family despite everything." The observation struck me as remarkably similar to something our father might indeed have said, practical yet affectionate, acknowledging reality while emphasizing possibility. "He always did prefer harmony to discord," I agreed, even if it meant papering over some pretty significant differences. Amanda laughed softly, the sound carrying in the still winter air. "Remember how he would literally leave the room when Mom and I started arguing about anything? Just stand up and walk out without a word. And come find me hiding in my room with a book," I added, the memory suddenly vivid. He'd say, "The Warriors are at it again. Want to help me in the garden? Until the battle's over?" We shared a smile of recognition, not just of the specific memory but of the family dynamic it represented. Amanda and our mother had been similar temperaments, verbal and confrontational when passionate about something. Dad and I had been the quieter counterweights, seeking peace but sometimes creating distance instead. "I think he worried we'd never find common ground after he was gone," Amanda said, her breath visible in the cold air. "That we'd just go our separate ways and let the family fragment." "He underestimated both of us then," I replied. "We may have different approaches to just about everything, but we're still connected. By this place, by history, by shared experience that no one else will ever fully understand." Amanda nodded, her expression thoughtful in the fading light. "The funny thing is, a year ago I thought I wanted this house for practical reasons. Financial. Equity, family asset, all of that. But standing here now, I realize what I really wanted was to maintain connection to all this." She gestured to encompass the cemetery, the gardens, the house visible through the trees, to make sure it wasn't lost. "It's not lost," I assured her. "It's changed, evolving, but the essence remains. And you're always connected to it, whether you live here or not." The understanding that passed between us in that moment transcended the legal agreement we had reached months earlier. Amanda wasn't relinquishing her claim to family heritage by accepting my residence in the house. She was acknowledging that there were different ways to honor and maintain connection to that heritage. My physical presence here and her emotional ties could coexist without conflict. As we walked back toward the warmly lit house, snow beginning to fall gently around us, Amanda linked her arm through mine in a gesture so reminiscent of our mother that it momentarily took my breath away. "The purple door is actually growing on me," she admitted, a smile in her voice. "Don't tell Kyle I said that, though. He's still traumatized by the idea of non-neutral exterior colors." The small joke, acknowledging our different aesthetic sensibilities while finding humor rather than judgment in the contrast, felt like the perfect note on which to conclude our private conversation. We were still Amanda and Jennifer, still fundamentally different in our approaches to life, still occasionally exasperated by each other's choices. But we had found a way to accept those differences without allowing them to sever our connection. Back inside, we rejoined the others for an evening of board games and conversation that flowed more easily than at any family gathering I could remember in years. The kids engaged in good-natured rivalry over Scrabble scores. Kyle revealed a surprising competitive streak when it came to trivia questions, and Amanda demonstrated the strategic thinking that had made her so successful in her corporate career. I found myself observing as much as participating, struck by how this gathering represented everything I had hoped might be possible when I first conceived of hosting Christmas. Not perfect harmony or artificial closeness, but genuine engagement that acknowledged both connection and difference, that created space for individual identity within the context of family bonds. The house itself seemed to embrace this harmony of contrasts, its traditional architecture providing structure for contemporary comfort, its historical elements complemented rather than contradicted by modern additions, its very walls containing both what had been and what was becoming. Like the family gathered within it, the house balanced continuity and change, inheritance and innovation. As the evening wound down and conversations moved toward plans for the following day, I excused myself briefly, stepping into my studio, for a moment of reflection amid the creative space that had become central to my identity. Looking at the paintings lined up for the upcoming Detroit exhibition, I felt a deep sense of integration between the physical environment I had created, the artistic vision I had developed, and the personal growth I had experienced. The exhibition was titled Inheritance Transformed, a phrase that now seemed to apply not just to my artistic practice, but to the entirety of my journey since returning to Pinewood. I had inherited this house, yes, but also family history, community, connections, creative impulses, and patterns of relating that required conscious examination. The transformation hadn't involved rejecting any of these inheritances, but engaging with them authentically, allowing them to evolve through active participation rather than passive acceptance. Amanda appeared in the studio doorway, interrupting my reverie. "The kids want to know if we can all have breakfast at the diner tomorrow before we head back," she said. "Apparently, Sophie has decided she needs to try the blueberry pancakes that are life-changing, according to your neighbor Diane." "Sounds perfect," I agreed, turning from the paintings to face my sister. "And maybe afterward, if you have time, Sophie could show me some of her artwork. I was serious about reviewing her portfolio for that summer program." Amanda's expression softened, with something that might have been gratitude. She'd love that. She doesn't talk about art much at home because... She hesitated, then finished with characteristic directness. "Because I don't really understand it, to be honest. I can tell when something looks nice, but I don't get the deeper aspects that clearly matter to her." The admission of limitation, rare from my typically confident sister, created an opening for genuine connection rather than comparison. That's where having a weird artistic aunt comes in handy, I said lightly. I might not understand corporate finance or political campaigning, but I do know something about creative development. Amanda smiled, acknowledging the gentle reference to our different strengths. We make a complete person between us, maybe. Always have, I agreed, even when we were driving each other crazy. As we rejoined the others in the living room, where Kyle was regaling the kids with obviously embellished stories about his college adventures, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with perfection or resolution of all differences. This Christmas gathering, so different from what I had feared when planning it, represented not an ending but a milestone in an ongoing journey of family redefinition. The house had played its role perfectly, providing both the physical setting and the symbolic framework for this relational shift. Like the property itself, our family connections had required both preservation of what remained valuable and renovation of what no longer served its purpose. The result was neither a return to the past nor a complete reinvention, but a thoughtful integration that honored history while creating space for growth. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, I stood alone in the quiet living room, Christmas tree lights casting colored shadows across walls I had painted, furniture I had arranged, spaces I had claimed as my own while respecting those who had occupied them before me. The purple door, that small act of declaration that had come to represent my independent vision, was invisible from this angle, but its presence informed the entire composition of my renovated home. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the gardens I had restored and the pathways I had cleared, creating a blank canvas upon which tomorrow's activities would leave temporary marks. By spring, when Tom and Lisa's wedding brought new celebrations to these grounds, all evidence of this Christmas gathering would have melted away. Yet the experience would remain, incorporated into the ongoing narrative of the house and its inhabitants. This, perhaps, was the most profound lesson of my journey since returning to Pinewood. That transformation is not a single event, but a continuous process. That identity emerges through ongoing engagement with environment and relationships. That home is not a static place but a dynamic interaction between past and present, self and surroundings, individual vision and shared history. As I turned out lights and prepared for bed on this Christmas night so different from the previous year's crisis, I felt profound gratitude not just for the legal resolution that had secured my place here, but for the deeper resolution that had occurred within me. I had found not just a house, but a home. Not just a career, but a calling. Not just a community, but belonging. Amanda's announcement last Christmas, that she intended to take the house I had begun to love, had initiated a year of growth I could never have anticipated. What had seemed like threat had become catalyst. What had appeared as ending had become beginning. The crisis had forced me to articulate, first to myself and then to others, what this place meant to me and why I belonged here. In doing so, I had discovered not just my right to remain, but my reason for staying. Not retreat from failure, but commitment to authentic creation. Not hiding from life, but engaging with it on terms that reflected my true values rather than external expectations or others' definitions of success. The house stood quiet around me, settled into itself after a day of unusual activity. Tomorrow would bring departure for my guests, return to the peaceful routine I had established, preparation for the exhibition that would launch the new year. Each day would add another layer to the ongoing renovation of spaces, of relationships, of self, that had become not just my residence but my life's work. As snow fell softly outside and Christmas lights cast their multicolored glow across the living room, I whispered a quiet thank you to the Father who had made this all possible, not just through his legal provisions, but through his understanding of where I belonged and what I needed to thrive. He had given me not just a house, but a foundation upon which to build an authentic life. That gift, far more valuable than property or possessions, had transformed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of what home truly meant. Not perfect but evolving. Not finished but continually renewed. Not defined by ownership but by relationship and creative engagement. Like the purple door that had come to symbolize my independent vision, this understanding represented both departure from convention and return to essential truth. That home is not where we retreat from the world, but where we find the security to engage with it authentically, the foundation from which we offer our unique contributions, the place where we are fully known and yet free to continue becoming. This Christmas night, surrounded by the visible results of a year's transformation, I embraced that understanding as the most valuable inheritance of all. Not the house itself, but the opportunity it represented to create a life of meaning, connection, and authentic expression. What had begun in crisis had evolved into purpose. What had started as mere shelter had become true sanctuary. Outside, the snow continued its gentle accumulation, covering yesterday's footprints while creating clean canvas for tomorrow's paths. Within these walls that had witnessed generations of family life, I had found not just my place, but my peace. Not perfect or permanent, but present and real. A gift I would continue unwrapping with each passing season. Christmas Eve arrived, with picture-perfect snowfall, transforming Pinewood into a scene worthy of a holiday card. I spent the morning making final preparations, arranging fresh greenery on the mantelpiece, setting out guest towels in the newly renovated upstairs bathroom, checking the refrigerator one last time to ensure I had everything for tomorrow's dinner. The house felt ready, peaceful yet expectant. I had done all I could to create a welcoming environment. What happened next would unfold according to its own dynamic. Amanda texted to confirm their arrival time, late afternoon depending on road conditions. Her message included a surprising postscript. The kids are excited about staying in Dad's house. Thanks for making this happen. The simple acknowledgement of shared connection to the property, Dad's house, rather than your house or the house I should own, suggested a subtle but significant shift in her perspective. Whatever the reason, I welcomed this hint of warmth. As midday approached, unexpected visitors arrived, Diane and several other neighbors bearing holiday treats and small gifts. "We wanted to stop by before your family arrives," Diane explained. "Just a little something to celebrate your first Christmas hosting in the renovated house." The impromptu gathering filled the kitchen with laughter and conversation as neighbors admired recent improvements and shared community news. Mr. Patel brought homemade samosas, explaining that while not traditional Christmas fare, they had become his contribution to neighborhood celebrations. Mrs. Abernathy delivered her legendary rum cake with strict instructions about proper serving temperature. Their easy presence in my home, their genuine interest in my work and renovations, their uncomplicated affection, all reinforced how thoroughly I had been woven into the community fabric during the past year. These connections had developed naturally through daily interactions, shared challenges like the ice storm, and mutual support through various life transitions. "We won't stay long," Diane assured me. "We just wanted you to know we're all thinking of you, hoping things go well with your sister." The fact that they knew about the complex dynamics with Amanda without my having explicitly explained them reminded me of both the challenges and comforts of small-town life. Privacy was limited, but so was isolation. People noticed. People cared. People showed up. After they departed, I moved through final preparations with renewed energy. Their visit had shifted my emotional state from focused tension to grateful anticipation, reminding me that whatever happened with Amanda, I had created genuine connections here that would remain. At 4:30, headlights swept across the front window as Amanda's SUV pulled into the driveway. I took a deep breath, centering myself in all I had learned and become over the past year, then opened the front door to welcome my sister and her family. Kyle emerged first, immediately assessing the fresh exterior paint and restored porch details with an appraising eye. Amanda followed, elegant even in travel clothes, her expression guarded but not hostile. Their children, Jason, 16 and visibly reluctant to be there, and Sophie, 12 and wide-eyed with curiosity, tumbled out last, immediately commenting on the snow-covered garden structures visible from the driveway. "The famous purple door?" Amanda asked, nodding toward the side entrance visible from where we stood. "In all its controversial glory," I confirmed, surprised to find myself smiling genuinely. "Come in. It's freezing out here." The next moments unfolded in the familiar awkwardness of family members who share history, but not daily life. Coats being removed, suitcases deposited, polite comments exchanged about the drive and the weather. I showed them to their rooms, Jason in what had been my childhood bedroom, Sophie in the third-floor space I had converted from storage to a charming dormer room, Amanda and Kyle in the main guest suite with its newly renovated bathroom. "This is not what I expected," Amanda admitted as she surveyed the guest room with its carefully balanced blend of original features and contemporary comforts. "When did you develop an eye for design?" "Apparently it was always there, just waiting for the right project," I replied, indicating the space for their luggage. "The bathroom's through there. I just finished the tile work last month." Kyle examined the custom shelving I had built into what had previously been an awkward alcove. "This is quality work. Did you hire a carpenter?" "I did it myself," I said, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "Tom helped with the initial framing, but the finishing is all mine." Something shifted in Kyle's expression. A reassessment. Perhaps recognition of competence he hadn't previously attributed to me. "Impressive?" he said simply, the single word carrying more genuine respect than any of our previous interactions. Downstairs, Sophie had discovered my studio and was examining the paintings with intense concentration. "You did all these?" she asked as I entered, her tone suggesting she had expected something less accomplished. "Most of them," I confirmed, though there are works by other local artists throughout the house as well. "They're really good," she said with the unfiltered honesty of early adolescence. "Mom said you were painting, but I thought it would be, like hobby stuff. These look professional." "They are professional," Jason corrected, entering behind me. "Aunt Jen's in magazines and galleries and stuff. Mom showed us the article." The casual confirmation that Amanda had not only seen my feature, but shared it with her children, apparently without dismissive commentary, was unexpectedly touching. Whatever her personal feelings about my choices, she had presented my work to her children as legitimate accomplishment. "Is that our grandparents' house?" Sophie asked, pointing to one of the interior paintings that showed the living room at different stages of renovation. "It is," I confirmed. "This series shows how spaces evolve over time, how they hold both past and present simultaneously." Sophie nodded seriously, studying the canvas. "It's like you can see both what it was and what it is now all at once." Her perception, so accurately capturing what I had been trying to express, caught me by surprise. "That's exactly the idea," I said, regarding my niece with new appreciation. "Have you done much art yourself?" The question opened a flood of enthusiastic description of her school art projects, revealing both genuine interest and substantial talent that had apparently gone largely unnoticed in her achievement-oriented household. As she spoke, Amanda appeared in the doorway, watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. "Sophie's art teacher suggested she apply to a summer program at the state university," she said when her daughter paused for breath. "But we weren't sure if it was worth the investment." The comment could have been interpreted as dismissive of artistic pursuits, but something in Amanda's tone suggested she was actually seeking my opinion rather than disparaging her daughter's interest. "I'd be happy to look at her portfolio, if that would help," I offered. "The program might be valuable if she's really interested in developing her skills." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. Maybe during this visit, she suggested, meeting her daughter's suddenly hopeful gaze. If your aunt doesn't mind. The exchange marked another subtle shift in our dynamic, Amanda acknowledging my professional expertise in an area where she lacked confidence, opening a potential avenue for meaningful connection beyond our complicated history. The evening progressed more smoothly than I had dared hope. We ordered pizza from the local place that had been our favorite growing up, a tradition our parents had maintained for Christmas Eve throughout our childhood. The familiar rituals seemed to ease lingering tension, creating a foundation of shared memory upon which new interactions could build. After dinner, Kyle surprised everyone by producing a deck of cards and suggesting the game our father had always insisted on during holiday gatherings. As we played around the kitchen table, the atmosphere gradually relaxed into something approaching genuine enjoyment rather than polite obligation. Remember when Dad used to let us stay up until midnight on Christmas Eve, and Mom would pretend to be scandalized by it? Amanda asked during a break in the game, her expression softening with the memory. And he'd make that awful eggnog that was basically just melted ice cream with nutmeg? I added, laughing at the recollection. Is that why there's a carton of vanilla ice cream in your freezer? Jason asked, raising an eyebrow. Planning to poison us with Grandpa's recipe? The moment of shared laughter felt like a small miracle, family connection briefly transcending the tensions and conflicts that had dominated our recent interactions. We were, for that moment at least, simply people who shared history and blood, finding comfort in common memory. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Amanda joined me on the porch where I had stepped out to enjoy the stillness of the snow-covered night. She wrapped her coat tightly against the cold, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. You've done something remarkable with the house, she said after a moment of silence. It's still clearly the place we grew up, but it's also undeniably yours now. The acknowledgement, so different from her dismissive attitude the previous Christmas, seemed to require a response that neither brushed it off nor overemphasized its significance. It's been a process, I said simply. Finding the balance between honoring what was here and creating something that reflects who I am. Now. Amanda nodded, her gaze fixed on the snow-covered garden. I didn't understand that a year ago. I just saw a valuable asset that should be divided equally. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I still think Dad's arrangement wasn't entirely fair to me, but I can see now why he made the decisions he did. The admission, perhaps the closest Amanda would ever come to acknowledging the rightness of my connection to the house, hung between us in the cold air. Rather than rushing to fill the space with reassurance or justification, I let the moment breathe, allowing her words their full weight. The thing is, she continued after a moment, you needed this place in a way I didn't. I have my life in Chicago, my career, my family. This was never going to be my home again, not really. I just couldn't see that when I felt like I was being overlooked. You weren't overlooked, I said quietly. Dad knew you had created your own foundations. I was the one still figuring out where I belonged. She turned to face me then, her expression more open than I had seen it in years. And you belong here. That's obvious now. Even the kids can see it. The simple validation, from the sister who had so often made me feel inadequate or peripheral, affected me more deeply than I had anticipated. Thank you, I said, my voice catching slightly. That means a lot, coming from you. Amanda's smile held a hint of her old competitive edge, but tempered now with something like genuine affection. Don't get used to it. I'm still the successful sister with the real job and 401k. I laughed, recognizing the teasing for what it was. Not dismissal, but a return to the complicated but fundamental sibling dynamic that had shaped us both. And I'm still the artistic dreamer who can't match her socks. Some things never change. But some things do, she replied, her tone serious again. You've found your way, Jenny. It's not the path I would have chosen, but it's clearly the right one for you. We stood together in companionable silence for another moment before the cold drove us back inside. The conversation hadn't erased decades of complex history or fully resolved our different perspectives on family and success. But it had acknowledged our distinct paths without elevating either as superior, a significant evolution from the hierarchy of achievement that had characterized our relationship for as long as I could remember. Christmas morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that turned the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling display of light and shadow. I rose early, enjoying the quiet house before the day's festivities began. In the kitchen, I prepared coffee and set out the ingredients for the traditional family breakfast my mother had always made. Cinnamon rolls rising on the counter, fruit waiting to be cut, bacon ready for the oven. As I worked, I was struck by how different this Christmas felt from the previous one, when Amanda's claim to the house had shattered my tentative sense of security. Then, I had been defensive and fearful, uncertain of my place literally and figuratively. Now, I moved. Through preparations with quiet confidence, secure in both my legal right to the property and, more importantly, my authentic connection to it. After breakfast and gift exchanges that revealed thoughtful consideration on all sides, I found myself alone in my studio for a moment of reflection. Looking at the paintings lined up for the upcoming Detroit exhibition, I felt a deep sense of integration between the physical environment I had created, the artistic vision I had developed, and the personal growth I had experienced. Amanda appeared in the studio doorway. The kids want to know if we can all have breakfast at the diner tomorrow before we head back, she said. Apparently, Sophie has decided she needs to try the blueberry pancakes that are life-changing, according to your neighbor Diane. Sounds perfect, I agreed, turning from the paintings to face my sister. And maybe afterward, if you have time, Sophie could show me some of her artwork? I was serious about reviewing her portfolio for that summer program. Amanda's expression softened with something that might have been gratitude. She'd love that. She doesn't talk about art much at home because... She hesitated, then finished, with characteristic directness. Because I don't really understand it, to be honest. I can tell when something looks nice, but I don't get the deeper aspects that clearly matter to her. The admission of limitation, rare from my typically confident sister, created an opening for genuine connection rather than comparison. That's where having a weird artistic aunt comes in handy, I said lightly. I might not understand corporate finance or political campaigning, but I do know something about creative development. Amanda smiled, acknowledging the gentle reference to our different strengths. We make a complete person between us, maybe. Always have, I agreed, even when we were driving each other crazy. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, I stood alone in the quiet living room, Christmas tree lights casting colored shadows across walls I had painted, furniture I had arranged, spaces I had claimed as my own while respecting those who had occupied them before me. The purple door, that small act of declaration that had come to represent my independent vision, was invisible from this angle, but its presence informed the entire composition of my renovated home. Amanda's announcement last Christmas, that she intended to take the house I had begun to love, had initiated a year of growth I could never have anticipated. What had seemed like threat had become catalyst. What had appeared as ending had become beginning. The crisis had forced me to articulate, first to myself and then to others, what this place meant to me and why I belonged here. In doing so, I had discovered not just my right to remain, but my reason for staying. Not retreat from failure, but commitment to authentic creation. Not hiding from life, but engaging with it on terms that reflected my true values, rather than external expectations. Or others' definitions of success. As snow fell softly outside and Christmas lights cast their multicolored glow across the living room, I whispered a quiet thank you to the Father who had made this all possible. not just through his legal provisions, but through his understanding of where I belonged and what I needed to thrive. He had given me not just a house, but a foundation upon which to build an authentic life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.